Palmyra began as a settlement in central Syria where survival depended on mastering a harsh landscape. Its local name, Tadmor, points to a long regional identity that predates Roman fame. Archaeological evidence reaches back to very early periods, and written references appear by the early 2nd millennium BCE, showing this was no sudden imperial outpost. The key to understanding Palmyra is location. It sat in the eastern Levant at a practical crossroads linking Mediterranean zones with Mesopotamian and Arabian spheres. In pre-modern trade, crossroads were not abstract points on maps. They were systems of wells, storage, escort agreements, and social trust. If a city could offer all that consistently, caravans returned, and return traffic created wealth. Palmyra did exactly this. Its rise was rooted in logistics before ideology, and in predictability before glory. The city's later monuments and political ambitions were built on that older foundation, a place that turned desert risk into a structured commercial advantage. As empires competed across West Asia, Palmyra changed hands repeatedly, but instability did not erase it. Instead, Palmyrines learned how to thrive between larger powers by becoming indispensable intermediaries. Their merchants became known across long-distance routes often grouped under the Silk Road world, and Palmyrene commercial activity spread through colonies and networks inside Roman territories. This matters because trade wealth did not come from a single luxury shipment. It came from repeated, lower-risk operations managed over time, contracts, transport timing, multilingual brokerage, and family partnerships in multiple cities. In effect, Palmyra built a trans-regional business model centuries before modern corporate language existed. The city's elites could convert commercial credibility into political influence because they controlled information and movement across frontiers. When distant capitals needed eastern goods and revenue, Palmyra's role grew. Trade here was not peripheral economics. It was the engine that financed civic expansion, empowered local leadership, and later made Palmyra confident enough to play a much larger geopolitical game. Palmyra's society was as strategic as its economy. Ethnically and culturally, it blended Amorite, Aramean, and Arab elements, and social organization relied heavily on kinship and clans. That structure gave commercial life durability because obligations could be enforced through family reputation, not only formal law. Language use reveals the same adaptive intelligence. Palmyrene Aramaic served local life and identity, while Koine Greek was used for commerce and diplomacy. This dual usage was practical statecraft at the civic level. Palmyra could communicate inward and outward without surrendering either sphere. Religious life was similarly layered, with local Semitic, Mesopotamian, and Arab deities worshipped in a city shaped by Hellenistic influence. Rather than replacing one identity with another, Palmyra accumulated identities and made them operational. That hybrid culture was not a soft background detail. It helped merchants negotiate across regions, helped elites speak to multiple audiences, and helped the city present itself as both rooted and cosmopolitan. In a frontier environment, that flexibility was a competitive advantage as real as military walls or caravan guards. Prosperity became visible in stone. Palmyra's great colonnade, the Temple of Bel, and its distinctive tower tombs were expensive projects requiring planning, labor coordination, and concentrated capital. These were not vanity structures alone. Monumental architecture sent clear messages to traders, rivals, and residents: this city is stable, wealthy, and organized. The colonnaded urban space shaped movement and ceremony. Temples anchored civic and spiritual legitimacy. Funerary towers expressed lineage continuity and elite memory. Palmyrene art and architecture blended Mediterranean traditions with local forms, producing a style that looked both familiar and unique. Across the ancient world, that visual synthesis mirrored the city's social reality, a broker civilization translating across systems. But monumental success also increased political visibility. A city that can build at this scale announces itself as a serious actor. In stable times, that attracts investment. In unstable times, it attracts suspicion. Palmyra's architecture therefore represents both the high point of commercial confidence and the future vulnerability of a city too prominent to be ignored when imperial authority tightened. Before its famous rebellion, Palmyra operated within Roman imperial structures while retaining meaningful autonomy. Attached to the province of Syria, its political organization in the first 2 centuries CE reflected Greek city-state models, with local civic institutions managing many internal affairs. This arrangement worked because Rome benefited from a prosperous, cooperative frontier city, and Palmyra benefited from imperial protection and broad market access. Over time, Palmyra became a Roman colonia, signaling deeper integration of Roman governance forms. Yet legal status did not erase local power realities. Frontier cities with strong economies and militarized responsibilities could act with substantial independence when central oversight weakened. By the 3rd century, Rome entered prolonged crisis, and eastern defense became urgent. In this setting, Palmyra's leaders were no longer just municipal elites. They became security actors whose decisions affected imperial survival in the region. The city's constitutional evolution from autonomous civic model toward concentrated rulership was not random. It reflected a broader pattern. When empires face external pressure, they often rely on local strong centers, and those centers can begin to imagine themselves as more than provincial partners. Palmyra reached its apex in the 260s under Odaenathus, who is credited with defeating the Sasanian emperor Shapur I. In the 3rd century crisis, that was a major strategic achievement. Military success gave Odaenathus extraordinary legitimacy because he delivered what imperial institutions struggled to provide: eastern security. Protecting routes meant safeguarding revenue, merchant confidence, and regional order, so victory translated directly into political authority. This was the hinge point where Palmyra's commercial base and military relevance fused. A wealthy city could now command armies and shape frontier outcomes, not merely host traders. Odaenathus' role also exposed a tension inside empires. The center needs competent regional power brokers, but every success increases those brokers' leverage. Loyalty and autonomy become harder to separate. Palmyra's shift toward monarchy in this period reflects that changed balance. Governance centered around individuals capable of coordinating war and diplomacy quickly. The model worked in the short term, but it increased succession risk and raised the stakes of any transition. Once power depends on charismatic leadership, the next chapter can either consolidate a dynasty or trigger confrontation with the imperial center. After Odaenathus, Zenobia emerged as regent and then as the defining leader of Palmyra's most dramatic phase. Her break with Rome and the creation of the Palmyrene Empire transformed the city from influential ally to imperial competitor. This move is often reduced to personal ambition, but structural conditions made it plausible. Palmyra had money from trade, administrative experience, military capability, and networks extending across key routes. It also had a political narrative. Eastern defense had been carried by Palmyrene leadership during Roman weakness. Under those conditions, seeking wider sovereignty could be framed as necessity, not rebellion. Zenobia's project challenged Rome's frontier logic itself. If local powers are empowered to secure distant regions, what prevents one from claiming equal legitimacy? For Rome, the answer could only be force. For Palmyra, the gamble was whether temporary Roman weakness could be converted into durable independence. The experiment was brief, but historically crucial. It showed how quickly a commercial city could become a state-level actor when imperial hierarchy faltered and local leadership could unite military and fiscal systems. Rome struck back under Emperor Aurelian, and in 273 Palmyra was leveled. This was not just the end of a revolt, it was a deliberate warning to other regions considering autonomy. Imperial restoration after crisis often relies on exemplary punishment, and Palmyra became that example. Yet full erasure was impractical because geography had not changed. The location remained useful, so later under Diocletian the city was restored at reduced scale. That reduction is revealing. Palmyra could survive as a controlled node, but not as an expansive rival center. Its infrastructure, population dynamics, and political horizon all contracted. This is a classic post-rebellion settlement: preserve utility, remove capacity for challenge. From this point, Palmyra's trajectory shifted from upward momentum to managed marginality. It still existed, still mattered locally, but no longer drove regional strategy at the same level. The same built grandeur that once signaled confidence now stood amid a diminished civic system. In historical terms, the city did not disappear in one event. It was structurally downgraded, then carried forward in a smaller role through changing imperial and post-imperial orders. Late antiquity brought major religious and linguistic transition. Palmyrines converted to Christianity during the 4th century, aligning with transformations across the Eastern Roman world. After the 7th century Rashidun conquest, Islam spread over subsequent centuries, and Arabic replaced Palmyrene and Greek in public life. These shifts are often told as abrupt replacements, but they usually unfold through overlap and gradual reorientation. Communities adapt through administration, education, trade incentives, marriage patterns, and changing prestige networks. Palmyra's earlier strength had been cultural translation, so transition likely involved negotiation rather than instant rupture. Still, these changes coincided with altered trade geographies and political centers, reducing Palmyra's regional weight. Under Byzantines and later rulers, it became a minor center rather than a major broker. Its identity did not vanish, but it ceased to shape long-distance systems. This phase is historically important because it shows decline as process, not catastrophe. Cities can remain inhabited and meaningful while losing strategic centrality. Palmyra's long middle period reminds us that history is mostly rescaling: fewer resources, narrower influence, and ongoing adaptation to worlds no longer organized around the city's old advantages. By 1400, destruction tied to Timurid campaigns further reduced Palmyra, and over time it contracted into a small settlement. Centuries later, under French mandatory rule in 1932, residents were moved to the new village of Tadmor, leaving the ancient site open for excavation. That administrative decision reshaped Palmyra's modern identity. It became less a living urban center and more an archaeological landscape interpreted by scholars, states, and global audiences. Excavations highlighted its inscriptions, architecture, and mixed cultural heritage, reinforcing Palmyra as a symbol of cross-civilizational exchange. But heritage status is not neutral. Once a site becomes globally symbolic, it enters modern politics, tourism economies, national narratives, international institutions, and ideological contestation. Palmyra's ruins were preserved and studied, yet also exposed to new forms of vulnerability. In this period, the city's meaning shifted from commercial function to representational power. It no longer controlled trade routes, but it shaped how the ancient Near East was imagined. That symbolic centrality would later make its monuments targets in conflict, proving that historical significance can increase risk as much as it increases protection. During the Syrian civil war, Palmyra entered a devastating new chapter. In 2015, the Islamic State captured the site and destroyed major parts of the ancient city. This destruction carried military, ideological, and media dimensions. Monuments were attacked not only as stones but as symbols of plural pasts and shared heritage. Palmyra was recaptured by the Syrian army on March 2, 2017, yet physical recovery could not restore everything lost. Later, after the fall of the Assad government in December 2024, it was captured by the Syrian Free Army, underscoring continued instability around control of the area. These rapid shifts show that heritage protection depends on broader political order. Without durable governance, conservation plans remain fragile. Palmyra's modern fate echoes its ancient pattern: strategic position and symbolic value draw repeated contests for authority. The tragedy is that each round of conflict narrows what can be transmitted to future generations. What survived empires in centuries can be undone quickly by modern ideological violence, making preservation not just a technical task but a political and ethical one. Palmyra's full story offers several enduring lessons. Geography can open opportunity, but institutions decide whether opportunity becomes lasting power. Palmyra succeeded by building trust networks across distance, not by relying on isolation. Cultural hybridity can be a strategic asset. Multilingual communication, mixed traditions, and flexible identity helped the city connect rival worlds. Yet frontier success carries danger. The same capabilities that make a city essential to empire can make it threatening to empire, as seen in the Zenobia episode and Aurelian's response. Decline, meanwhile, is rarely one dramatic fall. Palmyra endured through shrinking roles, religious change, language shifts, and altered trade systems, then re-emerged as archaeological symbol. In modern times, that symbolic role became another battleground. So Palmyra is not only a story of ruins. It is a case study in how commerce, culture, and coercion interact over millennia. It reminds us that cities are living systems, constantly translated by power. And it leaves a final question: when we preserve heritage, are we protecting stones alone, or the human memory of how complex societies once learned to coexist at the crossroads? If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.